coach side of things. So yeah, great to have you on board, and my partner in crime as usual, Tony, welcome. So today's session is on footwork sequences and choreographic sequences, because they make up a large part of everybody's programs, whether you're solo dance skater, free skater, precision team, quartet. Everybody has footwork sequences, and we are seeing a lot of the same issues across footwork sequences and choreographic sequences for everybody. So the first thing I wanted to do is put a question out there. If there's any skaters that are listening in, or young coaches, can someone tell me what's the minimum stuff you have to do to get a footwork sequence given as a level base? So if you're putting one into the program, what's the absolute minimum things you have to do? Can anyone tell? Josie, I can see you're online. You're a skater. Do you know what you need to do to get a footwork sequence? Just a level base. No.
I can answer. I don't know if I'm going to be right.
We'll give it a go.
Well, I think you have to cover 75% of the floor.
Yep.
You have to do steps and turns, but not necessarily called steps and turns.
Yep.
I know there's more, but I think that's it from me.
No, that's actually it. To get a footwork sequence called, that's all you have to do. And so for most of our skaters, we're successfully getting, oh, cool. So Matt and Daisy, you've got the right, close, you've gone for a level 1. So we're going to get to that in a second. So the base level is exactly what Macarena said. You have to cover 75% of the floor, and you have to do steps and turns. So we very rarely these days don't call at least a base level with footwork, but we have seen it occasionally when a skater comes from a small floor to a big floor and stays down one end of the floor, or does a very small pattern for their footwork sequence. So that's the easy part. The next step for most skaters is to get a level 1. And Matt and Daisy on the chat had that pretty well right. You need 4 counted turns, and depending on the type of footwork sequence, there might be some positions that you need to do or some skating features that you need to do. So it's really important when you're building these footwork sequences or artistic sequences, whatever they are, that you actually have a look in the rule book and look at what you need to do as a minimum. Now, what we wanted to cover today is that we're getting a lot of people asking us about how do they get a level 4. The trick is we want you to get level 1s first, and that's the key thing. So we had Matt and Daisy put in there that you need 4 turns. The key thing about those 4 turns is we need to be able to count them as good quality turns. So they need to have an edge in, they need to have an edge out, they can't be jumped, and they need to be of particular types. So brackets, rockers, counters, travels, or loops. Those are the turns that count. Okay. 3 turns don't count for footwork sequences with a level 1. Then depending on whether you're doing an artistic sequence, we're looking for, if it's an artistic sequence in dance, we're looking for things like skating elements. So they give you a list of skating elements, you need to do 3 of them. If it's a footwork sequence for free skating or one that's labeled as a footwork sequence for dance, it's body movements. Then there are other features you can do like choctaws or doing a cluster, which is 3 turns in a row, or for the higher level, you can do what they call different feet. So it's having some of the turns on your left foot or going to the left direction, and some of them on your right foot or going to the right direction. Okay, so it's quite simple to get started, but what we are having problems with is that people are trying to go straight to level 4 instead of going through the levels. And so what I would like to encourage you as a technical specialist is I'd like to see you guys out there doing a level 1 and getting that counted regularly, and then start adding things to get a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4. So the other thing to think about with the levels is about making sure you do the right things. For example, Choctaws as a feature, you have to do 1 in each direction. Can anyone tell me how you know which direction a Choctaw goes in for your footwork sequence?
Defined by the exit edge.
On the exit edge. Excellent, Amy, thank you. So yeah, if you think about it like spinning, if the edge takes you in an anti-clockwise direction, so if everybody can think about doing a right back outside edge, then a right back outside edge travels in an anti-clockwise circle. So that makes it an anti-clockwise Choctaw. If you were to finish on a left back outside edge, that goes clockwise. And so that's a clockwise Choctaw. Clear as mud? Cool. Has anybody got any questions about, just on that really basic level, about how the footwork sequences work from a technical perspective, about having the different turns and the different features? Has anybody got any questions about those? Cool. Okay, so let me get down here. Sorry, I'm just going to check the chat for a second. So Macarena is put in the chat the link to the rule books. We did that in one of the first sessions again earlier on as well. I'd highly recommend, if you don't have them, that you go in and print them out. They have all these things so that you can actually tick them off and get some idea of what you've got in your footwork sequences. In terms of the levels for whether it's quartets or precision or dance, as you step up the levels, it's basically adding more turns and more features. So for example, if you were taking a basic footwork sequence, like in a free skating, and you were able to get a level 1, if you want to get a level 2, then the next thing you do is you need to get 2 more turns counted. So instead of getting 4 turns counted, you need to get 6 turns counted. And then you need to have 2 features. So if you chose to do body movements in your first feature, then you need to do Choctaws or the cluster, for example. Okay, and then so on and all the way up. So level 3 is 8 turns and 3 features. And level 4 is 10 turns and 4 features. Now, the big thing is, with any of the turns, pick the turns that you can do, right? And I think Macca is going to cover off a little bit of that, and so is Tony. But the only limitation on turns is that you can only count them twice. So you could do, if you're really, really good at a left foot outside rocker, do 2 of them. If you're really good at a clockwise travel on your left foot, do 2 of them. You can have turns counted more than once, and you don't have to pick the most difficult turns in the book. The value you get for a level doesn't change based on the hardness or the difficulty of the turns that you pick. Okay, does that make sense?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Because I think I just learnt something.
Okay, that's a bonus.
So wait, so So if you want to do the 2 rockers, you don't have to change. Like I could do 2 left forward outside rockers.
Correct.
Okay, that's news to me. That's great.
If you were doing a level 3 or a level 4 and wanted the different feet feature to count, doing the same 2 turns twice would be problematic, because doing lots of turns repeated would be problematic because you'd be essentially going the same way all the time. And as you get to being a skater of a caliber that could do a level 3 or a level 4, I would expect to see a lot more variety. But if you're a young skater getting going, cadet or espoir or mini, and you're just starting to master a couple of turns, make those 2 the key turns in your footwork sequence when you come to competition day. The ones you think you can get reliably counted. So yeah, you could do 2 left anti-clockwise travels, which is my favorite direction, and you can do, it might be counters, it might be rockers, you might be really good at a bracket. Brackets are actually deceiving, but that's okay. But yeah, you don't have to pick the hardest ones. The only things that have to go in different directions are loops and chock tours. So for a loop to count, you need to go in both directions, and for chock tours to be as a feature, one's got to go one way, one's got to go the other.
I have another question. So I thought, so could I do left forward outside travel twice and then do a right forward inside travel? Would that count as 3 different turns?
No, because you've done 3 travels.
So, okay, so it's just 2 of the same type. You can repeat the foot and
so 2 brackets, 2 rockers, 2 counters, 2 travels, and 2 loops.
Okay, great.
There you go.
I tend to go for the feature of different feet, which is why I don't usually pay attention to that rule.
The trick with the feature for different feet is if you're doing a level 1, it's not a feature that's available to you. Yeah. So no, that's cool. Has anyone else got any questions about the technical side of how we look at the footwork sequences?
Can I just ask, it's Lisa here. My skaters never get levels, and it's really hard to know why they're missing out on a level. Is there any way of getting any feedback from the technical panel about what it is they're missing? Or
predominantly at the moment in New Zealand, it is either they're going in with an edge and coming out on a flat. A lot of skaters do a great preparation edge, and then just before they hit the turn, they go dead flat, or if they're trying to do a counter, they might completely change edge.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're seeing quite a bit of is they do a good edge in, and they come out flat, or they jump the turns. The jump turns are a really big one. I was fascinated at our nationals with the number of skaters and quite grippy wheels, because it was clear that the only way they could turn their skate was to pick part of it up off the floor. And when I hear clunk in every turn, I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah.
But in terms of as a generality, it's one of those 3 floors. They're either going flat. We see a lot of kids trying to do turns too quickly, like they do them one after the other really quickly.
Yeah, that was my other question. Is it best to do what in between the turns? Can you do like plain skating, or is it doing other types of turns in between the turns, or what would you recommend?
You can do poses, you can do little hops, you can do whatever you like. A couple of simple, nice edges is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Don't jam pack things.
And I would just say from a skating and coach's perspective that you will want to interpret the music in between. So say you've got a beginner skater that's doing a level 1 footwork sequence, and you've got your 4 turns. and you've got 30 seconds to do them. That's actually a long time. So you can do like a glide to the beat, and then you can do a little hop on the beat and then do your next turn. Yeah, they don't have to be all jam-packed into one.
And is it a good idea to have a couple of spare turns just in case one of them doesn't count, to have sort of a backup turn?
There is, but just remember, depending on the age category, there are some limitations. So if you are in an age category that has, say, a limit of level 2 and you do too many extra turns to have them up your sleeve, then we might actually end up bringing it back down again anyway. Because the encouragement is to work on having 4 great turns that you can do reliably, rather than have 4 rocky turns and chuck some extras in just in case. Okay.
Lisa, if you're not getting any levels counted, I would recommend dropping down to a level 1 for a while from a coach.
We were only trying a level 1, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had 4 turns and then I added in some extras just in case, it was missing out on, say, 1 turn, but still nothing counted at national. So I'm just trying to figure out sort of what to focus on to try and get those
depending on the age
all.
grade. The younger grades, it's generally because they're flat.
Yeah.
They get it in their head that they've got it. They come off the edge and they stand up and then they do the turn and then they go back onto the edge. And so cool. I'm going to get Tony just to give you a quick rundown on the QOE side of footwork sequences in general, and then we're going to, for the last little bit, pop back to a little bit about the choreographic sequence, and Macarena's got some tips and exercises and things. So Tony, if you just want to fill us in a little bit on the QOE side of things.
Yeah, well, basically leading on from what Pam was saying about levels, the QOE is an important part of your mark as well, as you probably have noticed. At the moment, we are giving a lot of negative QOEs for footwork sequences because there's a lot of skaters attempting to do stuff. And as a judge, we are also looking at the turns. And if the turns are flat, then we're obviously bringing down our levels and on our QOEs as well. So for a skater of a higher level, I understand with yours, Lisa, that are doing a level 1. If you're trying a level 3 and you're getting downgraded to a level 1, straight away your QOE is going to be in the negatives too, because of the fact that it's been downgraded. Because as a judge, we're seeing that stuff as well. You'd be better off doing a level 1 or level 2 and getting a positive QOE, and then you're getting a positive score instead of a negative score. So always think about when you are setting up your programs that you're actually getting your skaters to do something they can actually achieve and do something they can do. I know Macarena's got some ideas of how you can work on getting your turns working correctly. And that's really important because we are, even from the judging point of view, we are looking at the same things that the technical panel is, but we don't mark it the same way. We mark it differently, and we're looking at the entirety of the footwork sequence. So if they're doing nothing in between the turns, that's negative. So yes, you do want to be doing steps in between. You want to be doing poses, whatever you need to be doing, but you want to be doing the whole lot to music as well. And that's very important. And I think that pretty much covers the judging side of it. So there you go.
Probably the other thing to remember is with the features, pick features that they can do. I know that we had a number of skaters who had turns that counted, but then they did no body movements and their chop tours were both in the same direction. So suddenly they've got 4 turns, but no features. We've had not so much with, a little bit with body movements. If you're trying to do a leg up into a high space with a skater, make sure that the type of movement you're asking them to do, they can do. If a classic one we saw with skaters doing the artistic sequence was trying an illusion and not able to get their leg up high enough, or a Charlotte and not able to get their leg up high enough. If they can't jump, don't make the jump. One of the things they do is in the artistic sequence. Pick the things that they can do. If you read the QOE tables for dance, if you're teaching dance, it lists the different things that we're looking at when you're doing QOEs. The other thing is the choreographic sequence. Very quickly, from a technical perspective, we don't have too many things we have to focus on. The one key thing is we're looking for a stop and go or some form of stop to start it. And then the other thing is that we have to see a variety of movements and things that are trying to interpret the music. So we had a couple of choreo sequences at Nationals that were not given because the skater was doing predominantly glides and spread eagles with only a couple of 1 foot turns, and it all went round in one circle. Things like that. So just remember that the choreo sequence is no longer just a given. It's a valuable thing. It's 3 points for a dance skater if you get the choreo counted. So it's really important. If you don't get it counted, it's going to be a big chunk off your score. So yeah, stop and go, and like all other footwork sequences, the choreo has to cover 3/4 of the floor. Does anyone have any other things they've observed or any questions about the choreo before I hand over to Macarena for some tips and some ideas?
Yeah, we've got no more questions in the chat, Pam.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Can I just ask one thing?
Yeah, sure.
For the pivot, how much of a pivot is the pivot needed to do?
Are you talking precision?
No, in the as a variety in the choreo sequence.
Pivot? What are you talking about with a pivot?
There was one of the movements that you could choose, I believe, was a pivot.
Oh, like a pivot spin?
Well, I wasn't sure if it was a pivot spin or because it doesn't say spin.
I think that's just like one of the options of how you could interpret the music. So if you add the music like slow down.
Oh, I see.
It's just used as a linking step. It's not like you have to do it. It's just like a nice to have in case it fits the music kind of thing.
I was just curious what sort of how much of a pivot rotation, I guess, was needed for it to be known to be a pivot.
That's actually I think with the choreographic sequence, it's, yeah, to be fair, that's it. What I've learned something. I hadn't seen the word pivot in there. I've read that page several times and not actually recognized that word was in there. With most,
I can answer that.
Yeah,
I can answer that one. If it fits the music, do it for how long it needs to fit the music. The most important thing about a choreo sequence is you're interpreting the music.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things as a judge is you're looking for that choreo sequence. You've got a lot of skaters out there. You could put a different piece of music on and it wouldn't make any difference. So straight away, that's not a true choreo sequence because you're not getting into the music. It's really important when you're doing a choreo sequence that you are skating the music. You're not just skating alongside the music, you are skating the music. And at Nationals, for the first time, I had 2 skaters that I was able to give positives in the QOEs on the choreo because they skated the music. And that's really important. So that's what you got to look for in your choreo sequence.
so yeah, with the section and the choreo sequence, they're just examples of things. We're not actually sitting there going, right, we've got an Nina Bauer and we've got a spread eagle and we've got a 1 rotation jump and it's not like features in a footwork sequence. Those are just examples, but what I am looking for is, have I got things going to the left, things going to the right? Have I got a purely circular pattern, or have I got some wiggles in it? Have I got skating elements, turns, poses? Have I got variety? I don't need to have everything. But what I'm looking for is, can I say that I've got variety and that it is interpreting the music? Does that help? You could do the pivot for 180 degrees. You could do it for a 1/4 of a turn. You could do whatever. It's just an example. It's not.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, Macca, over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna try and be quick. So I think I have like a list, so I'm going to try and get through as much as we can. So starting with footwork, the 75% of the floor, what I've noticed in my skaters, and I've been called out for this as well, is that I started doing too hard of a choreography in terms of where it's going on the floor. And I noticed that when I do that, my younger skaters that aren't going as fast, when I make them do a loop like this and then continue, they don't actually get to cover the 75% of the floor because they're slower skaters, because they're just starting out. So just, yes, the pattern has to be interesting, but in order to cover that 75% of the floor, make it like an easier pattern. So make it like a wiggle like this or something, so that you're covering the floor. Just shoot things into the chat if you need help, but I use the rule book when I'm making up all of my routines. I don't have anything memorized. So I have it on my phone and I look at it. So when I'm making every single footwork, I look at the rules every single time, and I explain to my skaters why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. That doesn't work every time. I still miss stuff. But you know, I try. I really highly recommend working on every turn separately, especially now that kind of, if you're not having any, if you're not going to Oceanas or Worlds, this is the time to start working on every turn by itself. So me and Mercedes will pick like a couple of turns to do per lesson, and we will focus on like those 2 turns that lesson for 15-20 minutes. And then we also will put some kind of music on and ask the skaters to interpret the music however they want in between the 2 turns. So we say, go do, like, this is a counter, this is the counter that we want you to do today, and this is the rocker that we want you to do today. Let's practice it without music, just the 2 turns. And then we will go, okay, now we're putting on a tango piece of music or a samba or a whatever, and we'll get the skaters to kind of just move however they want. And what we're looking for is a change in the movement. So a sharp song needs sharp movements. Slow song will be more soft with the hands and more flowy. There's a question about how we make an upright spin count as a level. That's for artistic footwork, I'm guessing. For artistic sequences, you have to get 3 rotations in order for it to count for a footwork sequence. I've got some, can you guys see my screen? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, so these are 2 years old, these videos. So please excuse Mercedes. She was worried about you guys watching these videos because they're old and they're not as good as she skates now. But here's how we train trebles. There's an example of how you start teaching trebles to get more and more. So we train every single edge, inside forward, outside forward now in 2s, and inside back. Watch how she starts square in all of these videos. I've been seeing a lot of people at nationals starting with this hand behind them, and that makes it harder if you're already twisted for a treble. Your body is out of place in the treble and it's harder to stay upright. So see how she stays square for those inside ones. Then outsides, and you do 2, 2, 2, 2 over and over, and then you move on to 3, or you change edge like she's going to do now. So this is another exercise you can use for your more advanced skaters. Obviously you don't want to put that into a preliminary. You move on to doing them in 4s, and then you would also move on to doing them into 6s once they get them, and then 8s. And she's just going to go through every single edge. So this is her warm-up. This is how Mercedes, like, she puts her skates on. She does not do footwork sequences or artistic sequences. She runs through every single turn. And yeah, it takes a while, but eventually it does get quicker. It should take about 30 to 45 minutes to run through every turn. Here's a bracket one. This is the one she didn't want me to show you. So just like, this is just an example. But yeah, so it's a bracket and kind of like a wiggle pattern going inside forward. These are going to be outside forwards. When you are picking turns for your skaters, just make sure they're their best turns that they can do. You don't get any more points for doing harder turns. Yes, you can train them like Mercedes is doing here, but you, like a bad turn, you wouldn't put in a routine. Or if like this one is a hard one, that one's a little easier, but the outside back brackets are quite hard to do. So I wouldn't be putting that unless that skater can really nail that particular turn. Then this is a way that you can start training both of them. So you just do, you can put any two turns together, but this is just like to make sure that you're training every edge and every direction. Then this one, she's starting backwards instead of starting forwards. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's brackets. Then we've got counters and rockers. I think this is going to load. Yeah, cool. So this is outside forward counter, outside back counter. We've changed the way that counters are done now. I wouldn't put this hand in front. Mercedes doesn't really cross over, but at the end here, see how she's close to the edge that she's doing. We now have changed to face the edge that she's doing. So that hand would be behind her, like the end of a cross pull, and that foot, we actually like to bring it across like the end of a cross pull as well. So this is just a way to link them together. That's a what? Rocker? Yeah, rocker. Yeah, so I highly, highly recommend that you train turns separately like that. And that way, when you get up to picking stuff for a footwork for your new season, you've got turns that have already been trained that you can choose from. I'm just looking at my notes. Oh, you can do that. So we usually do this as a warm-up or a cool down. And you can add music and ask the skaters to interpret the music. So you're training musicality in between everything. So it's not just turn, 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 turn. Add some fun music, make them do it to Britney Spears one day, and then you do like tango the next day, just to make them, you know, interpret the music differently. Like, for example, loops, I wouldn't do a loop in a footwork sequence. I would put them in a choreo because they're not looking for counted turns. That's just a personal preference because my skaters can't do loops. And also I think what I noticed at Nationals is that my skaters were not holding their exit edges for long enough. They were kind of getting a good enough entry into the edge, but then they were moving on too quickly after the turn, and kind of just going to the next thing too quickly. And yeah, I just think my skaters need to learn how to hold their edges after the turns. And then I would recommend that you start training the hardest turns first. So if one of the skaters is like struggling with their rockers or whatever, I would put them at the start of the training session, so that you're getting the hardest thing out of the way first. It's also like, it feels good for the skater to be like, "Whew, okay, done with that one, like move on to easier turns." That's just something we've found really works for Mercedes. In terms of the technique for each turn, this is something that we're going to run through at our workshops. For like how to do rebend, because I don't think it's, we used to be like really strict on, as in me and Mercedes, used to think that every single turn had to be a down, up, down. But now we've actually, like, since she's gone to Italy, we've been finding that bending your knee after a turn will sometimes suck your speed from the turn. So for example, if I've started to play around with staying up on the knee after a travel, for example. So you do it if you're doing a travel and then finishing on an outside back edge and you want to go into a rocker for a cluster. I've been playing around with delaying the down movement. So you kind of go travel, come out on a high knee, and then re-bend as you go into the next edge to deepen the edge into the next turn. But it depends on what comes next, whether you're going to bend or stay up. So that's kind of hard to explain through Zoom. I also have started the year with minimal level for my skaters. So they almost always will start out with a level 1. And once they get that level 1 called, I will add in more turns and make it a level 2. Or I will add in, sometimes I'll add in 2 features just so that when they get to the place where they're getting the level 1 called, I can just add in 2 more turns and not have to change too much. So that's, I don't know, something I've been playing with. Any questions about footwork before I move on to choreography? I'm kind of word vomiting. Okay, I'll move on to choreo. I know I'm running out of time here. I think of footwork, I think of choreographies this year as a less important footwork, because your turns are not necessarily, the judges are not looking for specific turns or features, but by thinking about it as a footwork, I've been kind of resetting my mindset to be like, okay, I need turns and I need the features that would typically go into a footwork. So that's kind of worked as well for my skaters, my younger skaters, to understand what a choreography is as well. And then when I'm picking where I'm going to put the choreography, I pick the highlight in the music. So I will cut my song, and then I'll start by placing my footwork and my choreography in the best parts of the music for free skating, or I guess dance as well, actually. And then I just start thinking about, like, okay, those 30 seconds, what are the highlights in the music? How can I interpret a high note versus a low note with the body? Is it a soft piece? Is it a sharp piece? How can you convey that difference with each of your body parts? So like hands, like a sharp movement versus a soft movement. But it's also with the body too, because the body can kind of lock into place as well. And I try to use every beat with my older skaters. Obviously, the younger ones will probably need to just do the highlights. But as you get more and more advanced, the older ones should be able to use every beat in that choreography. I also train musicality off skates. So how to interpret music is really hard for younger skaters, but I try and get skaters to close their eyes. I have this exercise where we teach like a simple little choreography. So it could just be like hand up, hand down, hand up, hand down, and then reach out and come back. And then I get them to close their eyes and kind of add on to that choreography themselves. So I'll play the music and just be like, okay, start with the simple one that we just made up, and then you go on and do whatever to the song. And then I'll do the same choreography, but I'll change the song to make it really different. So like from a soft Adele song to like a tango or rock song, so that they have the ability to show me how that changes with their body. It doesn't work at first, and most like non-confident skaters will be like, what the hell are you asking me to do? But over time, they'll get more used to it. I've got actually, okay, while I continue talking, I'll just show you some things for how we train body positions. These are just some body positions. They're not all body positions, but this is just like a warm-up or cool down exercise that we like to use. So you have a mid, well, they're both mid, but they're just like, I don't know, just training to go outside of that box. So if you imagine that you are in a box, how can you break out of it and really reach out into all corners of the box that you're standing in? This is also how I start teaching chop tours with an inner bower, to get the inside edge to then rocking onto an outside, just training little hops and all of that. I try not to use toe stops in my routines unless they have meaning, especially not in choreography. I try and like give them a purposeful meaning, you know, to go with the music, because there's a hop needed because of whatever's happening. I'm just going to check my notes and then I think I'm done. Oh, last year when we were talking to Christina Moretti about training, I can't remember why it came up, but we were asking her how she trains musicality in her free skating lessons, and she said that she actually makes up a little transition in front of a jump. So she never actually trains jumps by themselves. She'll make like a little, a simple piece of foot, like doesn't have to be a specific turn or whatever. It can just be an inner bower into a glide and then a toe loop, just for like the little guys. It just means that you're always training musicality over and over and over again, and you can change the song and you're still training your jump, but you just have like a little added piece in front of it. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thanks, Mako. Joe, I just see in the chat you've asked another question to your other question. Have we answered that for you? So Joe's asking both. We can do 3 spins, but still no count. What are the actual points looked at by judges?
In a spin, you got to hold the position for 3 revolutions for a solo spin, and 2 for, I don't know, I'm the wrong person to ask. The judge should be answering that one.
No, you're quite right. It's three revolutions for in the correct position for any spin to count when it's solo, and two revolutions in the correct position for it to count as a combination. So I'm guessing you're talking about combination spins in free skating, or you're not talking about artistic sequences, because that's a little bit different. I'm guessing that's the case. Hope that answers it.
Joe, feel free to speak, and we answered that for you.
I also saw this question from Matt and Daisy Smith. Is a feature meaning a teapot or a glide? We're meaning a feature is the body movement. So you need a low body movement, a mid body movement, and a high body movement to count as one feature. So a teapot would, if you're meaning like one where you grab your foot and pull it up, I don't know how else to explain that. Wouldn't that be high if your foot is high enough? Because that is usually what I use for skaters that can't kick their leg up and to get into the high space. I usually use a teapot because usually that's easier to get that foot up.
Yeah, but yeah. Pam would know that, but she's had to go, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just seeing what Joe's come back there about the spins. As far as the judge is concerned, all the judge is giving, as far as the spin is concerned, is a QOE for the spin. And when there's either a solo spin or a combination spin, there's only one QOE given. And that QOE, especially on a combination spin, is a average over the 3 spins. So if you get one spin, say you do a sit spin with 2 uprights afterwards, and the sit spin's not counted, there's other things that happen on the technical side, but on the judge's point of view is straight away that'll give a little bit more negative because the sit spin's not come correctly, but they'll have a little bit of positive for the two uprights if they've done correctly. So you get a combination, say you had a -3 for the sit spin and then a 0 and a -1 for the uprights, you'd probably average out at either -1 or -2, depending on the quality of the item. So the judge is only giving a QOE for the spin itself, but they don't have anything to do with the whether they get a level or not. That's up to the technical panel. I hope that answers it.
And in terms of getting spins counted, I feel like maybe as coaches, we should be aiming for more than 2 or 3 revolutions if we want it to actually count, because when you're actually getting into the spin, that part's not counted as part of the revolution. So you have to actually like be in the correct position and spinning for 3 or more. I would aim for more in order to get that technical call.
The technical side of it, you're right. If they are spinning for 2 revolutions, then lose their edge and then do another revolution afterwards, then that spin's broken, so it's not counted for a solo. So that's where that one goes. So yeah. So your spins, you've got to get, like you say, you do more than 3 so that you're actually covered. It's the safest way to do it.
Oh, well, we've still got a few more comments coming in the chat, but I'm really mindful of the time. We've gone over, and unfortunately Pam has had to leave us, so she's given me the lovely job of closing. I'm just checking Raywin. Raywin's making a comment: a teapot in my head is a shoot the duck.
Yeah, that's different in Auckland. Teapot is a ship in Auckland. So that's why I was saying it's a high level. But yeah, shoot the duck would be a low level.
Right. And Brody's saying and spin must be on a spot, not travelled.
Correct.
Right. Cool. Right. So unless there are any other burning questions that are on your mind, I think we probably need to wrap this up. Really good discussions tonight. We have got another couple of Zoom sessions this time next week on the 30th of July. So 7 o'clock, the 30th, and the Sunday after that. So watch out for the Zoom links and information. And if you do have a specific question or something that you're wondering about, that you're curious, you want to learn more, but it's not actually in the topic, don't be shy. Send it through to the Artistic Secretary, Janine. And our panel here will help answer those questions for you and help you prepare to be competition ready. So thanks everybody. Thanks Maku for stepping in at the last minute with Phoenix being unwell, and thanks Tony as always. And I will wrap up the session and wish you all a good week. Thanks everybody.
See you later.
See ya.